what our priorities were. We were very clear about our priorities. The overall objective was, of course, to further reduce crime and make Suffolk County one of the safest places to live in the United States. But we were very clear about what our priorities were, and that was the number one was the number one problem, the number one priority was the opioid epidemic, and we were going to do everything in our power to crack down on drug dealing and to help the issue. We recently rolled out, so a lot of the programs that I just talked to you about have been in the works for about a year in terms of the law enforcement programs. We recently just rolled out a new one because, as you mentioned, we're doing a lot of work and a lot of good things are happening, and we do see some good results. For example, when we do targeted enforcement in the area, we do see overdose numbers drop temporarily, but we're not satisfied because the numbers, the final numbers aren't clear, but it looks like there will be a slight uptick in opioid-related fatal overdoses. So right away, we developed a new program that we think may be helpful, and we're going to pilot that program to see if it's effective. I'm going to pilot that program in the 6th precinct in Suffolk County because that's where we have most of our overdoses. And in addition to trying to get some of those Narcan saves, in addition to trying to get some of those overdose victims into treatment, we're also going to dedicate a field intelligence officer who is a detective in the Suffolk County Police Department with a specialty in essentially getting human intelligence to talk to these victims and try to see if we can get information about where they're getting their drugs from and target those drug dealers who are causing the overdoses. The point being is that we're going to constantly be looking at the numbers and fine-tuning what we're doing to make sure that we're getting results.
Commissioner, where do you think the drugs are coming from? Where are they coming from?
Yeah, and I mean they're coming.
Where's the pipeline?
Sure. I mean the pipeline is, of course, they're not coming from New York. You can't grow poppy in New York, and a lot of the heroin is coming from the Mexican border. There's no secret about that. And there are a few different pipelines. The Middle East is certainly on the radar, but I think the general consensus is that much of it is coming from the Mexican border, and we need to do everything in our power to provide information that shuts down that pipeline. So that's why it's key. It is critical for local police departments to be working with their federal law enforcement partners. It's not enough that we lock up the street level dealer. You got to find out who his supplier is and then who his supplier is. And the only agencies who are really best situated, the agencies that are best situated to deal with that are the federal agencies, because they're the ones dealing with multi-state issues. They're the one dealing with international narcotics trafficking. So if you're not plugged into the federal task forces, you're really leaving a lot of meat on the bone there. So that's why we made a decision very early on to engage all of our federal task forces. We now have more task force officers assigned to federal task forces than ever before, and it's actually a financial benefit to Suffolk County as well for two different reasons. One, federal agencies provide us with a modest but nonetheless a notable reimbursement for costs for those task force officers. But more importantly, we seize a lot of assets through those task forces. So when we work a case and we seize drug money, we get to take a portion of that drug money and utilize it for law enforcement purposes. And we're actually looking at different programs that we may be able to fund with asset forfeiture money, prevention programs. So I mean, it can't get any better than this, right? Taking down a drug dealer, taking his money, and then using that money to educate kids about healthy decision making and the dangers of substance abuse.
We're years into this crisis. This is nothing new. Do you feel like we're in the thick of it? Are we making progress?
I think it's a little too early to say. There is some data that suggests that the age of those overdosing are getting older, which suggests that prevention is working. But the data is we just don't have enough data, I think, to answer that question. And what we need to do is, keep on best practices, make serious investments in prevention, make sure law enforcement's doing its role, and constantly monitor the situation. That's why this federally funded drug analyst that we secured is key, because at least we know we have the data and we're taking a close look at what's occurring.
In law enforcement, you need real-time data.
Yeah. So we get weekly and monthly reports on what's happening, and that's thanks to a task force that I sit on out of the White House. Actually, it's out of the Office of Drug Control Policy out of the White House. It's called the HIDA team, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, and I want to thank HIDA for the resources that they've provided to Suffolk County.
Okay. And finally, with the new administration, you're on this team in Washington. Do you feel that there is a commitment toward ending the crisis in Washington with this new administration?
Yeah, I actually think the new president has talked about the opioid epidemic on multiple occasions. I've heard him on, in media outlets talking about it on multiple occasions, and that's a good thing. The more leaders in this country who talk about it, the better. And resources from the federal government would be very welcomed to address this issue. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if you see a package come out of the White House. And if I were the President of the United States, I would be thinking about a grant program for law enforcement agencies to utilize money to devote to this particular problem, whether it's to hire more school resource officers to do prevention programs, or whether it's to hire more narcotics detectives to do the traditional law enforcement role. I think that would be tremendously helpful.
Okay, thank you.